What if the very symbol of freedom, the Statue of Liberty, became the battleground for a fierce debate about who belongs in America? In a clash of ideals, one side argues that demanding English fluency or specific skills rewrites the nation's immigration story, while the other insists it's about honoring history and protecting the American worker. From fiery exchanges over green cards to explosive accusations of bias, what does it truly mean to be an immigrant in today's America?
What you're proposing here, what the president's proposing here, does not sound like it's in keeping with American tradition when it comes to immigration. The Statue of Liberty says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free." It doesn't say anything about speaking English or being able to be a computer programmer. Aren't you trying to change what it means to be an immigrant coming into this country if you're telling them you have to speak English? Can't people learn how to speak English when they get here?
Well, first of all, right now, it's a requirement that to be naturalized, you had to speak English. So the notion that speaking English wouldn't be a part of our immigration systems would be actually very ahistorical. Secondly, I don't want to get off into a whole thing about history here, but the Statue of Liberty is a symbol of liberty enlightening the world. It's a symbol of American liberty lighting the world. The poem that you're referring to that was added later is not actually part of the original Statue of Liberty, but more fundamentally, the history, but more fundamentally,
you're saying
the
that
history,
that does not represent.
I'm saying that
what the country has always thought of.
I'm saying the notion that
I'm saying the notion. I'm sorry.
No,
that sounds like
Jim, let me ask you a question.
That sounds like some national park revisionism.
No,
the Statue of Liberty has always been a beacon of hope to the world for people to send
do you believe,
their people to this country, and they're not always going to speak English, Stephen.
Jim,
they're not
do you
always
believe,
going to be highly skilled. They're not always going to be.
Jim, I appreciate your speech. Jim, I appreciate your speech. So let's talk about this.
It was a modest.
Jim, let's talk about this. In 1970, when we let in 300,000 people a year, was that violating or not violating the Statue of Liberty law of the land? In the 1990s, when it was 500,000 a year, was it violating or not violating the Statue of Liberty law of the land?
Was it violating?
When it was 700,000 a year. No, tell me what years. Tell me what years. Tell me what years meet. Tell me what years meet Jim Acosta's definition of the Statue of Liberty poem law of the land. So you're saying 1 million a year is the Statue of Liberty number. 900,000 violates it. 800,000 violates it.
You're sort of bringing a press one for English philosophy here to immigration, and that's never been what the United States has been about, Steve.
But your statement's also shockingly ahistorical in another respect too, which is if you look at the history of immigration, it's actually ebbed and flowed. We've had periods of very large waves, followed by periods of less immigration and more immigration. And during we've had
a period of immigration right now. The president wants to build a wall. You want to bring about a sweeping change to the immigration
Surely, Jim,
system.
you don't actually think that a wall affects green card policy. You couldn't possibly believe that, do you? Actually, the notion that you actually think immigration is at a historic law, the foreign-born population in the United States today, Jim,
on Monday, talking about how border crossings.
Do you really? I want to be serious, Jim. Do you really at CNN not know the difference between green card policy and illegal immigration?
Sir,
you really don't know that?
Cuban immigrant. He came to this country in 1962, right before the Cuban Missile Crisis, and obtained a green card. Yes, people who immigrate to this country can eventually. People who immigrate to this country not through Ellis Island,
as a factual question,
in other ways, do obtain a green card at some point. They do it through a lot of hard work, and yes, they may learn English as a second language later on in life.
But
this whole notion of they could learn, they have to learn English before they get to the United States. Are we just going to bring in people from Great Britain and Australia?
Jim, I have to honestly say, I am shocked at your statement that you think that only people from Great Britain and Australia would know English. It reveals your cosmopolitan bias to a shocking degree that in your mind, this is an amazing moment. This is an amazing moment that you think only people from Great Britain or Australia would speak English is so insulting to millions of hardworking immigrants who do speak English from all over the world. Jim, have you honestly never met an immigrant from another country who speaks English outside of Great Britain and Australia? Is that your personal experience?
Of course, there are people who come.
But that's not what you said, and it shows your cosmopolitan bias. And I just want to say,
it sounds like you're trying to engineer the racial and ethnic flow of people into this country.
Jim, that is one of the most outrageous, insulting, ignorant and foolish things you've ever said, and for you that's still a really... The notion that you think that this is a racist bill is so wrong and so insulting. Jim, the reality is that the foreign-born population into our country has quadrupled since 1970. That's a fact. It's been mostly driven by green card policy. Now, this bill allows for immediate nuclear family members to come into the country, much as they would today, and then it adds an additional points-based system. The people who've been hurt the most, the people who've been hurt the most by the policy you're advocating are
What policy am I advocating?
apparently just unfettered, uncontrolled migration. The people who've been hurt the most by the policy.
What you're doing is for
The people who've been
open
hurt the most by the
borders.
policy that you're. The people who've been hurt the most by the policy you're advocating are immigrant workers and minority workers and African American workers and Hispanic workers.
Targeting
And
the
it has
African
no.
American community. Now you brought it up again. You said you wanted to have a conversation and not target. Is it going to be a target?
This is
now?
what we want to
You keep
do.
Using the African American community, are you going to target? I'm not trying to be funny, but
Right,
you
and
keep
I know what
saying
you're
this.
saying. What you're saying is 100% correct.
Thank you.
We want to help unemployed African Americans in this country, and unemployed workers of all backgrounds get jobs. And insinuations like Jim made, trying to ascribe nefarious motives to a compassion immigration measure designed to help newcomers and current arrivals alike, is wrong. And this is a positive, optimistic proposal that says 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, we want to have an immigration system that takes care of the people who are coming here and the people who are already living here by having standards, by having a real clear requirement that you be able to support yourself financially, by making sure that employers can pay a living wage. That's the right policy for our country, and it's the president's commitment to taking care of American workers. I apologize, Jim, if things got heated, but you did make some pretty rough insinuations. So thank you. Thank you.
Question for Mike. Steve, I can start with you. There have been reports that Trump is unhappy with the rate of deportations and he wants them to be higher. Is the president happy with the rate of deportations, and are there any plans to speed up the process?
Well, first of all, we all appreciate the encouragement from the media to deport as many illegal aliens as humanly possible. So thank you, and I will promise you that the full might of the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, and every element and instrument of national power will be used to remove, with speed, all criminal illegals from the soil of the United States of America, to enforce final removal orders, and to ensure that this country is for American citizens and those who legally belong in this country. We inherited an ICE that was completely shuttered. We inherited a Department of Homeland Security whose sole mission was to resettle illegal aliens within the United States of America. In 30 days, the president sealed the border shut, declared the cartels to be terrorist organizations, has increased ICE deportations to levels not seen in decades, and we are shortly on the verge of achieving a pace and speed of deportations this country has never before seen. Thank you.
So you spoke about Doge. You said roughly $50 billion is set to be cut in a year of waste, fraud, and abuse by unelected bureaucrats. We're hearing this ironic narrative from the president's critics and the left-wing media that Elon Musk is an unelected bureaucrat and he's doing all this terrible stuff. Isn't one of Doge's objectives to get rid of the federal bureaucracy, the deep state? And also, who was running the White House when Joe Biden was in office? Because I don't know a single person who believes it was Joe Biden.
Yes, you're tempting me to say some very harsh things about some of our media friends. Yes, it is true that many of the people in this room for 4 years failed to cover the fact that Joe Biden was mentally incompetent and was not running the country. It is also true that many people in this room who have used this talking point that Elon is not elected fail to understand how government works. So I'm glad for the opportunity for a brief civics lesson. A president is elected by the whole American people. He's the only official in the entire government that is elected by the entire nation, right? Judges are appointed, members of Congress are elected at the district or state level, just one man. And the Constitution, Article 2, has a clause known as the vesting clause, and it says the executive power shall be vested in a president, singular. The whole will of democracy is imbued into the elected president. That president then appoints staff to then impose that democratic will onto the government. The threat to democracy, indeed the existential threat to democracy, is the unelected bureaucracy of lifetime tenured civil servants who believe they answer to no one, who believe they can do whatever they want without consequence, who believe they can set their own agenda no matter what Americans vote for. So Americans vote for radical FBI reform, and FBI agents say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote for radical reform on our energy policies, but EPA bureaucrats say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote to end DEI, racist DEI policies, and lawyers at the Department of Justice say they don't want to change. What President Trump is doing is he is removing federal bureaucrats who are defying democracy by failing to implement his lawful orders, which are the will of the whole American people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm looking at the clock. We've almost had an hour of time. I know a couple of these individuals have a meeting to get to at 2 p.m. So you're welcome to follow up with my team for further questions. We're going to let these guys get back to running the United States government. And we will see you all later. President Trump will be speaking at 3 o'clock at the Black History Month reception. So thank you. It's good to see you. We'll see you in a bit. Thanks.